A black waitress helped an elderly man every morning until the day his lawyers entered the restaurant with 4 bodyguards. Looking specifically for her, the doorbell at Café Aurora rang at Badan Sichertiefen a.m. But it wasn't the sound itself that made Kayla pause. It was the silence that followed. 5 men in black suits stepped into the small restaurant, and the tension in the air became so heavy that even the frying pan seemed to stop sizzling. Kayla Santos, 29, was wiping down a table when she looked up and saw something she would never forget. 4 large security guards surrounded a gray-haired man carrying an expensive leather briefcase. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on her. "Are you Miss Kayla Santos?" he asked, walking straight toward her. Kayla's heart pounded. Was it legal trouble? Something related to her mother's debts? She nodded nervously, unable to speak. The entire restaurant had frozen Rasu watching from the kitchen, or Boss Wim from behind the counter, and the morning customers staring in silence. "My name is Dr. Hamilton, attorney for the Whitmore family. I need to talk to you about Mr. Robert Whitmore." Kayla felt the ground shift beneath her. Robert, the quiet, elderly man at table 7 who had come to the cafe every day for 2 years, always at the same time, always ordering black coffee and whole wheat toast, and barely saying more than a whispered good morning. The 78-year-old man she had grown unexpectedly attached to. Is he okay?" she finally asked. Dr. Hamilton lowered his head slightly. "Mr. Whitmore passed away last night in his sleep. He left very specific instructions regarding you." Kayla's knees weakened. Robert was gone. The old man whose toast she cut because his hands shook. The man she always served with an extra smile because she sensed his loneliness. The man who left a $2 tip every single day, more than he could truly afford, though she accepted it because she knew it mattered to him. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears gathering. "But I don't understand. He left something for you," Dr. Hamilton said, opening a folder. "Mr. Whitmore was very private about his financial situation. You need to come with us now, to the office." Wim quickly came over, tense. "Kayla, what's going on?" "She didn't do anything wrong." Dr. Hamilton smiled for the first time. "On the contrary, she did everything right." Kayla looked around the small cafe where she had worked for 4 years. The place where she had endured looks of contempt for being the only black employee, where she had overheard whispered comments about people like her serving food. The place where Robert had shown up one day and, unlike everyone else, treated her with the dignity she deserved. She untied her apron with trembling hands, unaware that the next few minutes would change her life in ways she never could have imagined. Because Robert Whitmore wasn't just a lonely old man, and his family was about to learn that underestimating a black waitress would become the biggest mistake of their privileged lives. If this story of kindness and hidden truths touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to discover how a simple act of compassion would turn into the most satisfying revenge against a wealthy family's deeply rooted prejudice. Dr. Hamilton's office occupied 3 floors of a building in the city's financial district, marble, dark wood, and a panoramic view worth more than Kayla made in an entire year. She felt small walking through the silent corridors, her worn sneakers echoing against the shiny floor. "This way, Miss Santos," Dr. Hamilton said, guiding her into a meeting room where 3 people were already waiting. Kayla immediately knew these were the people who would despise her more than anyone else. Sitting in leather chairs that looked almost like thrones were Victoria Whitmore, a 50-year-old woman with a cold kind of beauty shaped by decades of privilege. Her son, Bradley, 28, dressed in a suit that cost more than Kayla's car, and a young blonde woman Kayla assumed was the daughter-in-law. Victoria barely lifted her head when Kayla entered. Bradley looked her over from head to toe with an expression of thinly veiled disgust. "Is this the person?" he asked, as though Kayla were some type of strange insect. "Bradley, please," Dr. Hamilton murmured. But Kayla noticed that even he seemed uneasy about her being there. "Have a seat," the lawyer instructed. Pointing to a lone chair on the opposite side of the table, Kayla sat down. Trying to ignore how much she felt like a defendant in a courtroom, Dr. Hamilton opened a thick folder. "Mr. Robert Whitmore's will was registered 3 months ago, when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He chose not to tell his family about the illness. Victoria lifted a perfectly shaped eyebrow. Typical of Dad, always dramatic until the very end. He left specific instructions on how the reading should be conducted. Hamilton continued. First, for the family, the Beacon Hill Mansion. The 2 summer homes, the art collection valued at $12 million, and a $50 million trust fund to be divided equally between Victoria and Bradley. Alessia felt her breath leave her. $50 million. More money than she could comprehend. Bradley's shoulders loosened. Well, at least the old man didn't completely lose his mind. However, Dr. Hamilton went on, and Kayla noticed the slight shift in his tone. There's a second part of the will concerning the family business. Victoria frowned. What second part? Hamilton flipped the page. The Whitmore Holdings restaurant chain, including 47 establishments in 6 states, the distribution center, and all associated commercial assets. He paused and looked directly at Kayla. ... are left entirely to Miss Kayla Santos. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Victoria's face went completely pale. Bradley actually choked. This is a mistake, Victoria said, her voice controlled but edged with hysteria. It has to be a mistake. There is no mistake, Hamilton replied calmly. Additionally, there is a $15 million operating fund designated solely for restaurant improvements and expansion, also placed under Miss Santos's full control. Bradley burst out. That's ridiculous. She's a waitress. She didn't even know my grandfather. For the first time since she arrived, Kayla found her voice. I did know Robert. Every day for the last 2 years. Robert. Victoria let out a cold, harsh laugh. You called him by his first name? As if you were friends. You were friends, Kayla said firmly. He told me about his favorite books, about how he missed his wife. About how what? Bradley cut in, leaning forward like a predator. About how easy it would be to manipulate a lonely old man. About how much money he had? The accusation struck Kayla like a slap. I didn't even know he had money. I thought he was just a retiree who, please, Victoria said with contempt. A black waitress at a cheap cafe doesn't get $80 million by chance. You knew exactly what you were doing. Dr. Hamilton slammed his hand on the table. Enough. Mr. Whitmore's instructions were clear. There is also a personal letter for Miss Santos. He handed Kayla a sealed envelope. With shaking hands, she opened it and began to read aloud. My dear Kayla, if you are reading this, then my time has come to an end. For 2 years, you were the only person who treated me like a human being, not a bank account. You didn't know I owned the restaurant chain where you worked. You didn't know that I watched every act of kindness you showed, not only toward me, but toward all the customers. Victoria made a sound of disbelief. But Kayla kept reading. In the last months of my life, I pretended to need help cutting my toast to test whether your kindness was genuine or calculated. You never asked anything personal. Never treated me as a source of favors. When the young homeless man came into the cafe and you paid for his meal from your own pocket, you didn't know I saw it. When you stood up for Rosa in the kitchen after that rude customer harassed her, you didn't know it reached my ears. Bradley and Victoria exchanged looks that grew more alarmed with every sentence. My family will inherit my personal wealth. But my businesses will go to someone who understands that feeding people is about dignity, not only profit. Kayla, you have a heart that this family lost long ago. Use these resources to show the world that kindness and success can go hand in hand. Kayla finished reading, tears in her eyes. The silence in the room felt as heavy as concrete. Finally, Victoria shot to her feet. We're going to contest this. We'll prove she manipulated him. Good luck, Dr. Hamilton replied coolly. Mr. Whitmore spent 3 months documenting every interaction with Miss Santos. He hired private investigators to verify her character. He has security footage, witnesses, complete records. This will is protected against any challenge. Bradley slammed his fist on the table. This is insane. She doesn't know how to run a company. Mr. Whitmore appointed an advisory board to guide her, Hamilton said. and he made it clear that any attempt at sabotage by the family would result in the complete loss of their inheritance as well. Victoria stared at Kayla with pure hatred. "You may have fooled a sick old man, but you won't last a week in the business world. We're going to destroy you." Kayla rose slowly, feeling something unfamiliar growing inside her. It wasn't fear, it was a fierce determination she hadn't known she possessed. "You can try." As the Whitmore family stormed out, letting their threats linger in the air, Kayla stayed seated, clutching Robert's letter. To them, she was an intruder, an unqualified opportunist. What they didn't know was that Kayla Santos had grown up in a neighborhood where every day was a fight to survive, where she learned early that judging someone by their appearance was the quickest path to your own downfall. And now, for the first time in her life, she had the resources to prove that kindness wasn't weakness. It was power, the strongest kind there was. Every contemptuous look from the Whitmore family only reinforced a truth they would learn too late. When you underestimate someone with nothing to lose, you give them everything they need to win. The next 2 weeks felt like being pushed into the ocean when you barely knew how to swim. Kayla suddenly found herself the literal owner of a restaurant empire she had no idea how to manage. And while the Whitmores worked tirelessly to make her life miserable, the very first meeting at Whitmore Holdings headquarters was an orchestrated humiliation. Bradley had summoned all the regional managers, 15 middle-aged. White men in expensive suits sat waiting, their expressions carrying thinly disguised contempt. Kayla stepped into the conference room wearing her best dress, one she had bought at a discount store, and instantly felt like an outsider entering hostile territory. "Everyone, meet our new owner," Bradley announced with a venomous smile. "Kayla Santos, who comes to us directly from where was it again?" He pretended to think. "Oh, yes, serving coffee." Mocking laughter drifted around the room. Kayla took her place at the head of the table, the seat that was technically hers, and tried to ignore the looks exchanged between the managers. "Well?" Kayla Bradley continued, flipping through a folder as the new owner. "I assume you have some groundbreaking ideas for improving our establishments. Perhaps stronger coffee?" More snickering. Kayla inhaled deeply. She refused to be intimidated. "Actually, I do have some observations." Bradley's smile widened, the grin of a predator watching prey step neatly into his trap. "Please enlighten us." "I visited 7 restaurants in the chain over the last 10 days, Kayla began, her voice steadier now. "In 5 of them, I saw Black and Latino employees concentrated in kitchen and cleaning positions, while customer-facing roles were mostly white. At 3 locations, I witnessed managers treating employees of color very differently." The mood in the room shifted. The smirks began to fade. "Additionally," Kayla continued, "the menus are identical in neighborhoods with completely different demographics. The downtown restaurant charges $18 for a hamburger that costs $12 in the suburbs, even though the operating expenses are nearly the same." Bradley tried to cut in, but Kayla kept going, and there's more. "Online reviews show repeated complaints about service quality that match the demographic makeup of each location. Is it a coincidence that the worst reviews come from neighborhoods where you place the least experienced staff?" One of the managers, Peterson, let out a dismissive snort. "With all due respect, miss, running restaurants isn't about social issues. It's about profit." "You're right, Mr. Peterson," Kayla replied calmly. "And speaking of profit, your numbers in the Southern District have dropped 23% in the last year. Coincidentally, that's the region where you implemented the staff optimization policy that resulted in firing older, more experienced employees." Peterson went pale. How did she know those exact numbers? The truth was that Kayla had spent the last 2 weeks studying with relentless focus. Dr. Hamilton had given her access to all the financial reports, and she had discovered something surprising. She had a natural talent for analyzing data. Years of stretching her family's tight budget, calculating tips, and managing shifts at the cafe had given her a mathematical intuition she'd never recognized. But even more importantly, she had found an unexpected ally. Linda Chen had been the company's CFO for 12 years, a 45-year-old Asian American. woman who had been repeatedly passed over for promotions despite flawless results. When Kayla requested the reports, Linda had been distant and strictly professional at first. But something shifted when Kayla asked questions that went beyond surface-level details. "Why don't you invest more in training?" Kayla had asked during her second visit to the office. "Turnover costs are eating up 15% of net profit." Linda stopped typing and looked at her for the first time with genuine interest. "You really read the reports?" "I read them 3 times," Kayla admitted. "And there are things that don't add up." That was when Linda began showing her the data no one else paid attention to, the inconsistencies, the strange patterns, the numbers that simply didn't make sense. And that was how. Kayla discovered that the Whitmore sabotage went far beyond hostile meetings. Bradley was actively undermining operations, transferring competent employees into poor positions, canceling contracts with reliable suppliers, artificially inflating expenses in certain restaurants. He was trying to make the company look unstable and badly managed to justify a forced sale. "He thinks you'll give up in a few weeks," Linda explained one evening after work, pointing to spreadsheets on her computer. "The plan is to create an operational crisis, then offer to fix it by buying the company back for a fraction of its value." "And Victoria knows about this?" Kayla asked. "Victoria is handling the legal strategy," Linda replied. "They already have lawyers trying to find loopholes in the will." Kayla felt anger and determination rising in her chest. "And you?" she asked quietly. "Why are you helping me?" Linda let out a bitter laugh. "Because I watched. Bradley wastes millions on innovations that anyone with 2 brain cells knew would fail. Because Victoria called me daddy's helper to my face when I questioned a suspicious investment. And because," Linda hesitated, "because Robert Whitmore hired me when no one else in corporate finance would give an Asian woman a chance. He believed in people others underestimated." In that moment, Kayla realized she wasn't alone. Robert had left behind more than money in restaurants. He had left a network of loyal people who had been pushed aside or ignored by the family in the days that followed. Kayla began meeting them. Marcus Williams, the black manager of the most profitable restaurant, who had been transferred to the worst-performing location shortly after his success. Sophia Morales, a skilled chef who wasn't allowed to introduce menu changes because she didn't understand the clientele. James Park, a digital marketing specialist, whose campaigns aimed at diverse communities were mocked in meetings. They all had something in common. They were capable, hardworking, and systematically sabotaged by the Whitmores. "Robert talked to us," Marcus said during a discreet lunch. Not officially, but he knew. He asked questions. He watched. "I think he was documenting everything." "Documenting what?" Kayla asked. "How the family treated employees. How they wasted money. How they were destroying the company he built from the inside," he explained. But it was Sophia who provided the most important clue. "There's a safe in his office. It hasn't been opened since he died. The lawyer said only you're authorized." That night, Kayla stood alone in Robert's old office on the executive floor. The safe was hidden behind a painting, and she opened it with the combination Dr. Hamilton had given her in a sealed envelope. Inside, she found something that made her heart race. Years of discreet recordings, conversations, meetings, phone calls. Robert had carefully documented every questionable decision, every prejudiced remark, every instance of the family's mismanagement. And there was more. Private investigations into Bradley's and Victoria's finances, reports on shell companies, offshore accounts, and what looked like a complex money laundering scheme using the restaurants as a front. "Oh my God," Kayla whispered, flipping through documents that revealed millions of dollars had been embezzled over the years. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Bradley. "I hope you're enjoying playing businesswoman. Next week we have a meeting with investors who want to buy. I'm sure they'll make an offer even you can understand." Kayla smiled for the first time in days. They truly believed she was just a frightened waitress pretending to do business. They had no idea they had just declared war on someone who now held enough evidence to destroy not only their reputations, but their freedom. As she carefully organized the documents Robert had left behind, Kayla felt something growing inside her. She was no longer the intimidated girl who had walked out of the courthouse a few weeks earlier. She was a woman who finally understood that Robert hadn't only given her a company, he had given her the tools to prove that underestimating someone because of their background was the first step toward self-destruction. Bradley's meeting with the investors would take place in 5 days. He expected to present a company in crisis, run by someone incompetent, ready to be sold for pennies. What he didn't know was that Kayla had spent the past weeks not only learning how to run a business, but also figuring out how to dismantle the life of anyone who tried to take what was rightfully hers. Because when you grow up surviving in a world that constantly doubts your abilities, you learn a truth privileged people never do. The difference between looking strong and being truly dangerous is that the latter comes with evidence, allies, and a plan so well constructed that, when revealed, it is already too late for any defense. The meeting with the potential investors was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the executive lounge on the 30th floor. Bradley had chosen the location strategically, a room with a panoramic view of the city, an imported marble table, and an atmosphere of power he believed would intimidate any waitress who didn't belong. Kayla arrived 5 minutes early. Carrying a simple briefcase and accompanied only by Linda Chen, the 5 investors were already seated. Middle-aged white men in expensive suits, wearing the cynical expressions of people expecting a quick, profitable deal, gentlemen, Bradley said, wearing his most charming smile. Allow me to introduce our current owner, Kayla Santos. As you can see, she's a bit overwhelmed by the company's responsibilities. Victoria, elegant in a designer suit, added with fake sympathy, "Poor thing, she really tried. But running a restaurant empire isn't like serving coffee, is it, dear?" Kayla sat calmly at the head of the table, the seat that belonged to her. "Thank you for coming, gentlemen. Before we discuss any sale, I believe you deserve to know a few facts about the company you're considering buying." Bradley laughed. "Kayla, please." "These gentlemen are not here to listen to theories from an employee. They're here to conduct serious business." "You're right, Bradley," Kayla said, opening her briefcase. "Serious business requires complete transparency. For example, did you know that in the last 18 months, $2.3 million has simply disappeared from the financial reports?" Bradley's smile weakened. "I don't know what you're talking about." Kayla handed each investor a set of documents, transfers to offshore accounts, inflated contracts with shell companies, fake invoices, all signed by Bradley Whitmore. Mr. Henderson, the lead investor, scanned the pages, his interest clearly shifting. "These numbers don't match the reports we received," he said. "That's because the reports you received were doctored." Kayla replied. Linda connected a laptop to the room's projector. "Dr. Hamilton, may you come in, please?" The door opened, and the lawyer entered, carrying a box filled with evidence. Victoria turned pale instantly. "What the hell's going on here?" Bradley shouted, jumping to his feet. Just as Kayla said simply. The first recording appeared on the screen. It was unmistakably Bradley's voice on a phone call. "I need the sales in the Southern District to look terrible. Cancel the contracts with the cheap suppliers and hire those friends of ours who charge triple. When the waitress realizes she's in the red, she'll want to sell quickly." The room fell into absolute silence. Victoria tried to stand, but Dr. Hamilton gently stopped her. "Please remain seated. There's much more." The second recording showed Victoria instructing accountants to manipulate financial reports. The third contained openly racist comments about Kayla. The fourth documented their bribing of suppliers to deliver intentionally low-quality products to restaurants after Robert's death. "My God," one investor murmured. "You were sabotaging your own company to force a fraudulent sale." Bradley was sweating now. That was taken out of context. "She's trying to frame us." "Context?" Kayla replied with a cold smile. "What context justifies this?" A security video from the office appeared next, showing Bradley destroying important documents 3 days after Robert's death. His voice was clear. "Burn everything. The little black girl can't find out the real numbers." Victoria finally lost control. You recorded private conversations? That's illegal. Actually, Dr. Hamilton said, all of these recordings were made by Robert Whitmore himself. On his private property and in his personal office, places where he had every legal right to record. He suspected for years that you were stealing from him. Henderson glanced at the other investors. Gentlemen, I believe we have no interest in a company involved in financial fraud. Wait. Bradley shouted in desperation. She's lying. She's a manipulator. A what, Bradley? Kayla asked calmly. Go ahead. In front of all these respectable gentlemen, tell me exactly what you think I am. Bradley opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water, knowing that any word he spoke would only confirm the prejudice already exposed in the recordings. Kayla rose gracefully. Gentlemen, as you can see, Whitmore Holdings is very well managed. The problem was never management. It was internal sabotage. Now that this has been resolved, Kayla continued, our growth projection for the next 5 years shows a 300% increase in profitability. Linda presented the real numbers. Without the Whitmore's manipulation, the company was exceptionally solid and profitable. Therefore, Kayla said, I am no longer interested in selling, but I do have an alternative proposal. She smiled, and for the first time. It was a smile that made Bradley instinctively pull back. I am buying your share of the inheritance. I can offer $5 million for each of your shares. $5 million? Victoria exclaimed. Our inheritance is worth $50 million. Was worth, Dr. Hamilton corrected. Before the evidence of fraud that has just been presented, with criminal proceedings about to begin, a federal investigation for money laundering, and the public exposure that is coming. Your stake in the company isn't even worth that. Kayla opened a sealed envelope. Gentlemen, investors, you may be interested to know that I've already delivered copies of all this evidence to the FBI, the IRS, and the New York Times. The story comes out tomorrow morning. Bradley's face turned bright red. You can't do this to us. We're family. Family. Kayla laughed, without amusement. Family doesn't try to destroy the company the patriarch built. Family doesn't steal. And family certainly doesn't use expressions like little black girl when they think no one is listening. Victoria tried one last tactic, her mask of politeness finally collapsing. You may have these recordings, but no one will accept a person like you running a serious company. You don't belong in this world. Kayla looked around the room at the investors, who now watched her with clear respect, at Linda, who smiled proudly, and at Dr. Hamilton, who gave her a nod of approval. You're right, Victoria. I don't belong in your world. I belong in a world where character matters more than pedigree, where competence is worth more than connections, and where treating people with dignity is not optional. She paused, letting the moment settle. That's exactly why I'm going to thrive where you failed. Henderson stood and extended his hand. Miss Santos, it would be an honor to do business with someone of your integrity. When you're ready to expand, come see us. As the investors greeted Kayla and completely ignored the Whitmores, Bradley and Victoria gathered their belongings in humiliated silence. Their privileged lives, built on arrogance and prejudice, had collapsed in a single morning. At the door, Victoria turned back one last time. This won't last. You're going to fail. And when you do, no one will be there to help you. Kayla smiled serenely. Victoria, you've already given me the greatest gift possible, Kayla said calmly. You underestimated me so much that you gave me the time and space to show what I'm really capable of. Thank you for that. After everyone had left, Kayla stood alone in the room, looking out the panoramic window at the city she could now call her own. Robert had given her more than a company. He had given her a lesson on how to turn prejudice into fuel for success. But Kayla's story was far from over, because when you strip power from people who have always had everything, they don't give up easily. And what the Whitmores didn't know was that their public humiliation was only beginning. And it would be far more devastating than anything that had happened in that meeting. 6 months later, Kayla appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine as Breakthrough Businesswoman of the Year. Whitmore. Holdings had become the most profitable restaurant chain in the region. With 23 new locations and a nationally replicated diversity program, Bradley was working as a sales manager at a department store. After being fired from 3 jobs for attitude problems, Victoria was selling insurance over the phone. Her mansion mortgaged to pay legal fees at the grand opening of the new downtown restaurant. Kayla cut the ribbon beside a framed photo of Robert. "Thank you for teaching me that kindness is power," she whispered. Marcus, now the regional director, smiled. He knew how to pick people. The best revenge isn't destroying those who underestimate. Udette's building something so remarkable that they spend the rest of their lives wondering how they could have been so blind. Kayla proved that character outweighs privilege. If this story inspired, ya subscribe to the channel, foe.